All right, so today we're going to talk about why we make art, why we as artists have decided to create work, and what we do with that work. What does it mean for us? And so I want you to take a moment in your sketchbook and write down why it is you choose to make art. Like, why are you still taking art classes? You're not required to, right? You've all chosen at this point to be involved in art making. Why did you make that decision? What is it that you find in art that's important to you? And after you do that, after you take that pause for a second, I want to show you some artists and the different reasons that they've made art, and the different reasons that artists throughout time have made art. So, I'm going to start with modernism. Modernism is a European tradition. It's art about art, right? It's artists making art to talk about why and how artists can make art. And so you see artists like Pablo Picasso, and Picasso was making art challenging the notions of what art could be. Artists like Picasso pushed beyond the making of art as a realistic depiction and moved into stylization of abstraction. Artists like Piet Mondrian challenged what the world had considered a painting to be by pushing into pure geometric abstraction, as you can see here in Broadway Boogie Woogie from 1943. And then you've got Jackson Pollock, who developed action painting, where he aggressively threw paint on gigantic canvases that he had laid out on the floor. Even he was concerned that he might have gone too far, asking his wife, painter Lee Krasner, "Is this a painting?" History has decided they are not only paintings, but they are very important ones at that. Native Texan Robert Rauschenberg began to include everyday objects into his work, as in this piece, Bed, in which he uses an actual bed as an art-making material. An artist like Dan Flavin pushed further into questioning what materials can be used to make art by turning to industrial materials. Specifically, here Flavin made work using colored fluorescent lights. And of course, Damien Hirst uses an actual taxidermied shark in his conceptual work, The Physical Impossibility of Death in the Mind of Someone Living. Now, you've got a lot of artists that make art to promote social change, to look at the way we live in the world and to try to convince others that change needs to happen. So of course you've got Banksy, who I think everybody's heard of at this point. He's a contemporary British graffiti artist making works that normally comment on social problems like income inequality, poverty, and environmental ills. And the Names Project, which created the AIDS Memorial Quilt. And it's an enormous quilt made as a memorial to celebrate the lives of people who have died of AIDS-related causes. It weighs an estimated 54 tons and is the largest piece of community folk art in the world. And then you've got Chris Burden, All the Submarines of the United States of America from 1987. And this is a really interesting work where Burden makes sculptures of all the submarines that are traveling around underwater, kind of unknown to us as Americans, and kind of lets us reflect a little bit about, the high cost of military and the threat of nuclear war and all of those things that we don't often think about and that don't enter our everyday life. And this gives us a kind of a depiction of like all of those warships that are out at sea all the time, just kind of, doing what warships do. And then you've got Simon Starling here, who creates an intricate performance-like situation to demonstrate the consequences of squandering the finite supplies of fossil fuels. In this work, he takes a small boat and he adds a steam engine for its motor. He then attempts to make it across a lake, breaking off pieces of the boat to fuel the fire to power the steam engine. And the results are obviously what you would expect them to be. A lot of artists make work to celebrate the sacred, right? We have a long history of artists making work as part of their religious practice or to celebrate their religion or their spirituality. We're most familiar with the European traditions that we see in like Gothic cathedrals and that kind of thing, as you can see here in the Ghent altarpiece. Jan van Eyck created one of the most celebrated altarpieces of art history, which depicts stories from the Bible and was used as a decorative work behind the altar during Christian religious ceremonies. But even today, artists still use art making as a way to invoke and celebrate the sacred. Now, of course, artists still make work that celebrates the sacred. Here you can see work by Pakistani-American artist Anila Age, and she uses light and cast shadows to transform spaces into a place that alludes to Islamic sacred spaces, which are dense with geometric ornamentation and pattern that is reminiscent of 15th century mosques from Spain. Yayoi Kusama is a Japanese artist and writer. Her infinity rooms are constructed out of lights and mirrors to provide an opportunity to reflect and celebrate life and its aftermath. The pinpricks of light in the otherwise darkened room appear to reflect endlessly in the mirrors, giving the viewer the experience of being in an apparently endless space. Now, the Dallas Museum of Art recently purchased an infinity room, All the Eternal Love I Have for Pumpkins. Here you can see the pictures I took with my daughter the last time it was on display. The Rothko Chapel is another artistic sacred space. It was dedicated in 1971 as an intimate sanctuary available to people of every belief. It's a tranquil, meditative environment designed in collaboration with the painter Mark Rothko. That's why it's called the Rothko Chapel. And it welcomes over 60,000 visitors each year. People from every faith in all parts of the world are welcome to use that space as a reflection space, or a prayer space, or a meditation space, whatever it is that they celebrate. And then you've got Robert Smithson's monumental earthwork spiral jetty from 1970. It's located on the Great Salt Lake in Utah. And using rocks and earth from the site, the artist created a coil that's 1,500 feet long and 15 feet wide that stretches out counterclockwise in the translucent red water of the Great Salt Lake. You can see it a little closer here. And so this is a pathway that the artist intended you to walk to kind of meditate and center yourself. And then you've got Roden Crater, located in northern Arizona, and it's an unprecedented large-scale artwork that is still in the process of being created within a volcanic cinder cone. It's made by artist James Turrell. Roden Crater is a controlled environment for experiencing and contemplating light. Turrell has been transforming the inner cone of the crater into a massive naked eye observatory designed specifically for viewing and experiencing skylight, solar, and celestial phenomena, helping individuals kind of find and center their place in the universe. There's also artist documentation of recording the world, or some aspect of the world, or some aspect of life. So of course we're all familiar with the classic traditions of still life painting, where artists would paint the world to just document how it looked. But our need for that as a society has changed because of technology and cell phone cameras and everything else. So artists have found interesting ways to use artist documentation. Here you can see An Kawara, who's one of my favorite artists, documenting his life in a ritualistic and mundane action where he takes the time he got up and uses an adjustable stamp to stamp it on postcards and then mails it to a friend. And this, of course, was well before social media, but it really allows him to, document his existence in the really one of the most boring ways possible. And then you've got Ed Ruscha, who created this photo book, Every Building on the Sunset Strip, which literally documents every building on the Sunset Strip in 1966. It's very premonition to Google Street View, right? Obviously well before that was in existence. And here's another Robert Smithson work. We saw his spiral jetty, and this is a sculptural work that makes reference to some of the environmental spaces he works in. He took an aerial photograph of a space and then created these boxes that are referential and correspond to that aerial photograph, and then fill those boxes with rocks and dirt from those spaces. So it's almost like a map and sample. It's very, it seems very scientific. And then you've got artist personal exploration, where artists take the act of making art as a way to communicate something deeply personal about themselves or about their place in the world. So you've got Kathy Kollwitz, who regularly made work referencing war and death as she lived in Germany during World War I. And not only did she see the destruction of the war in her own city, but her firstborn son was drafted and died in World War I. And so she became an ardent anti-war activist, which shows up a lot in her art making. No Crying Aloud in the Barbershop is a work Pepin Osario made in memory of his first haircut and other formative events that influenced his understanding of cultural identity and masculinity. Felix Gonzalez Torres' work celebrates the life of the artist's partner that died during the AIDS epidemic, and it's a pile of candy that is the same weight of Ross when he was living, and it's placed in a pile, and viewers are invited to take a piece of the candy, and in that way Felix Gonzalez Torres shares his memory of his lost love with everyone. And then Sophie Calais' Take Care of Yourself is an interesting examination of loss. She had received a breakup via email, which is rough. And to help her process that, she sent the email to 107 different women of various professions, and they interpreted the email for her. She then installed their responses in a gallery display. I'm taking something very personal and private and making it very public and participant. So that's what I want you all to think about today, right? I want you to answer some questions about what it is and why it is that you make art, right? What is it that you like about being an artist and about this art making process? All right, so that's all I have for you today. I want you to go ahead, hop into your sketchbook or into the module and answer those questions to really think about why it is you as an artist like to make art. What is it that makes this journey and this work interesting to you? And then spend any time you have left after doing that on working on whatever you're working on. All right? If you have any questions, you all know how to get a hold of me. Zoom, messages, email, phone call, whatever it is you need, and I'm more than happy to help. Other than that, I hope you have a marvelous day, and I look forward to talking to you soon. Take care of yourself.